Live daily gay LGBT evening news, and it's 7 p.m. Thursday, April 16, 2020. Tonight we bring you our special Q&A on coronavirus for the LGBT community with our special guest tonight, Dr. Howard Grossman, internal medicine specialist with an emphasis on HIV. We're going to ask and answer many of your questions about coronavirus tonight on Q News Tonight. We begin right at the top of the show with our breaking Q News to report that today Joe Biden roars over Trump's false choice to decide between coronavirus safety measures and the economy. Let us show you a little of the highlights of what he said today. Watch this.
I truly believe we're going to come out of this stronger. People are frightened. They're frightened. The nurses who are afraid to go home because they may get their children get infected. They have little kids at home. What are they going to do? How are they going to take care of their child? What's going to happen when they can't see mom? What bothers me so much is the President of the United States doesn't take responsibility. It drives me crazy. He doesn't understand about people's fears. It seems to always be about him. It's like this idea of making sure we delay getting the checks out till his name can be on them. He doesn't take responsibility. He's President of the United States of America. The President is supposed to take care of things. The way you revive the economy is you defeat the disease.
We're just going to have to listen to science and to the experts, listen to the facts.
Look at the people risking their lives every day. And it makes you proud as hell to realize how, in fact, giving the American people are. It's about the American people. All of a sudden, people are realizing nurses, if there's any angels in heaven, they're all nurses, male and female, that they, in fact, what they do every single day. Cops on the street, firefighters. Now people have seen what real life is like for so many people.
Yeah.
I believe we have an opportunity to move forward. I truly believe we're going to come out of this stronger.
Joe Biden said this morning that the decision between protecting people's health from coronavirus and the reopening of the United States economy is a false choice because you can't do one without the other.
In a dramatic interview, the presidential Democratic nominee was asked what he would say to people who might favor a move by President Donald Trump to reopen the economy soon if it means they can get back to work and put food on the table. Biden said, quote, "I say we should not send you back to work till it's safe to send you back to work. This is a false choice." Biden, who was home speaking to his wife from Delaware, said to Joe Biden, "The way you revive the economy is you defeat the disease."
The nation's governors are preparing for the shock of the restart plan as the Vice President Biden said Trump is not listening to healthcare professionals and scientists, but rather listening to the need for money and his own politics.
So good evening again, America. It's 7 p.m. Thursday, April 16th, 2020. It's time to queer up the news. We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your stories are next on Q News Tonight.
Tonight on the world's first live daily queer evening news show.
Tonight's news about the gay community and the news from an LGBTQ perspective. Are our gay stories important to you? In headlines, politics, entertainment, gay culture, travel, religion, and more. Reported by respected anchors.
Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight.
Welcome to Q News Tonight. We are live and unscripted, so anything can happen. Tonight we are going to bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBT community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and these are my co-guest anchors, Misty Eyes.
Hi, my favorite segment during this epidemic is Coronavirus Good News.
And anchor Napoleon Plays.
Hi, everybody. I cannot wait to tell you about what Ellen DeGeneres, a longtime role model, and others are doing to help this crisis.
Sounds exciting. Let's cue up the news. We begin during the COVID-19 crisis at Q News Tonight. We will bring you today's bullet points on coronavirus, the most important news of the day that we call Quarantine Quickies. Here are those headlines for Thursday, April 16, 2020. Quarantine Quickies. The facts for Thursday, April 16th. We report the facts to you that today in the USA, nearly 600,000 infections exist and nearly 35,000 people have died. We report from NBC News that 10 to 20%, shocking, of all USA deaths are now healthcare workers. We report that Americans tested in 2020 for COVID-19 is a shameful 0.99%, less than 1%. It's grown all week, but still less than 1%, as just 10 out of every 1,000 Americans have been tested. And we report the state of COVID-19's Hall of Shame, as we hope you don't live in any of these places on this list. Number 5 is California. Only 5 out of every 1,000 people know if they have COVID-19, just 0.55%. Number 4 is Virginia. Only 5 out of every 1,000 know they have COVID-19, also 0.55%. Number 3 is Texas. Only 5 out of 1,000 know if they have COVID-19, 0.54%. Number 2 is Kansas. Only 5 out of every 1,000 know if they have COVID-19 at 0.50%. And the leader of our state's Hall of Shame is number 1, Puerto Rico. Only 2 out of every 1,000 know if they have COVID-19, tested at a rate of just 0.29%. Q News Tonight asks, President Trump, where is testing?
Quarantine Quickies. President to unveil guidelines for reopening of America. President Donald Trump is set to unveil new guidelines on Thursday meant to help states loosen their social distancing guidelines, even as business leaders and governors warn persistent testing shortfalls could hamper any effort to reopen the country. The guidelines, meant to speed Trump's goals of restarting a collapsed economy, won't be mandatory, and the ultimate decision on how and when to open will fall to individual governors, many of whom have already extended restrictions into May. Trump said, quote, "There has to be a balance, you know? There's also death involved in keeping it closed." As a broadcast of Q News Tonight, details of Trump's plans are breaking and not yet available.
Quarantine Quickie. Facebook to refer flagged coronavirus in an inaccurate post to the World Health Organization Mythbuster website. Facebook announced today they will begin to alert users after they've been exposed to misinformation about the coronavirus. This is the latest in a series of actions meant to curtail the spread of wrong or misleading claims related to the pandemic. Users who have liked, commented on, or reacted to coronavirus misinformation that has been flagged as harmful by Facebook and removed will now be directed to a website debunking coronavirus myths from the World Health Organization.
Quarantine Quickies. City governments. Sickness, death, then layoffs that are going to limit your services for years. In just 2 months, here is what American cities have become. First, sickness, then death, and now significant layoffs. Coronavirus forces are forcing cities to cut budgets and furlough staff. From Detroit to New York, nearly every city in the country is facing lower revenues as a result of coronavirus. That's leading to painful cuts to city services as well as layoffs and furloughs. In Detroit, for example, the outbreak has stolen an estimated $348 million from the city's budget for the next 16 months, nearly a quarter of all of its money the city had been counting on. Detroit Mayor Mike Dugan said as he announced layoffs for all 200 part-time or seasonal employees, as well as steep pay cuts or reduced hours for more than 2,200 full-time staffers, quote, "We expected a downturn. We were prepared for it, but we didn't expect it to be this sudden or this dire. This is going to dramatically affect every city in America, which means the cut or outright loss of services is going to dramatically affect every American."
Quarantine quickies. Ivanka Trump skirted coronavirus guidelines to travel to New Jersey. Ivanka Trump and her family traveled to the Trump National Golf Club in New Jersey last week to celebrate Passover, despite federal guidelines that advised against non-essential travel and a stay-at-home order that was in effect in Washington, D.C. The president's eldest daughter went with her husband, Trump advisor Jared Kushner, and their 3 young children to the Trump Golf Club in Bedminster.
Quarantine quickies. What's happening to grandma? To young LGBTQ America, do you have elderly parents or grandparents? For you who thought coronavirus was not an issue that affected you, tonight we come full circle. Yesterday, an anonymous tip that led to the discovery of 17 bodies crowded into only a 4-person morgue at one of New Jersey's largest nursing homes. Police found the bodies this week at the Andover Rehabilitation Center 1 and 2 in Sussex County, Northwest New Jersey. 68 people linked to Andover, New Jersey's nursing home have died in recent weeks, including 2 staff members. Eric Danielson, the town's chief of police, said, quote, "They were just overwhelmed by the amount of people who were being expired." 5,500 people have died in American nursing home facilities because of COVID-19, and that has increased by 100% in just the last 7 days.
So that is our special segment for the LGBTQ community called Quarantine Quickies, the headlines for Thursday, April 16, 2020. You can continue to count on Q News tonight to give you the facts on the pandemic. After bringing you these quickies, however, in the news, we will follow these headlines with a segment we call Coronavirus Good News. With COVID-19, we all can use a little good news. So we report on the absolute best of America and the world while in pandemic. We call the segment Coronavirus Good News for Thursday, April 16, 2020. Coronavirus Good News. Broadway star and Actors Fund president goes to New York City's balcony to bring the impossible dream to life. Broadway actor Brian Mitchell, who is president of the Broadway Actors Fund, has contracted COVID-19 and is currently in quarantine in his New York City apartment. He continues to try to help Broadway actors where Broadway theaters are going to be dark for months. Yesterday, in a moment of desperation, Brian walked out onto his balcony to do what he does best: sing Broadway songs. And Brian Mitchell knew the exact song to sing to the neighborhood and balconies all around him. Of course, he chose to dream, the impossible dream. And that is a coronavirus good news. Watch this.
Coronavirus good news. Michael Che of SNL. Grandma dies of COVID-19. His amazing tribute for her tenant neighbors. Saturday Night Live comedian Michael Che announced that he's going to pay the rent for people living in a New York City public housing building where his grandmother, who died of coronavirus, lived. Che said Wednesday, "It's crazy to me that residents of public housing are still expected to pay their rent when so many New Yorkers can't even work." Che, 36, said he would cover the rent for all 160 units in the building. And that's coronavirus good news. Watch this.
Saturday Night Live's Michael Che doing his part to help those in need while honoring his late grandmother at the same time. Che lost his grandmother, Martha, to COVID-19. He's decided to pay 1 month's rent for all 160 apartments in the New York City Housing Authority building that she once lived in. An Instagram post, Michael Che said, "It's crazy to me that residents of public housing are still expected to pay their rent when so many New Yorkers can't even work." He says, "I know it's just a drop in the bucket, so I hope the city has a better plan for debt forgiveness for all the people in public housing."
Coronavirus good news. We stand for New York. An emotional new tribute. We are in this together. New York sports teams unite for a message. We are in this together. Today, all of the professional and college sports teams of New York supported an emotional message of unity by standing up for people in the city and state that has had the most infected and more deaths than anywhere else on our planet. The message is called, "We are in this together." It's amazing. And that is coronavirus good news. Watch this.
Coronavirus good news. 99-year-old man turns 100 and raises $16 million for healthcare workers using his walker. A 99-year-old war veteran has raised $16 million for the British National Health Service and healthcare workers by walking laps around his garden. Tom Moore, a former captain in the Army who turns 100 at the end of the month, has long surpassed his original target to raise 1,000 pounds by walking the length of his garden in Bedfordshire, England, 100 times before his 100th birthday. Mr. Moore has become an internet sensation doing this, and even Britain's Prime Minister said he represents the absolute best of British spirit in the era of pandemic. And that is truly coronavirus good news. Watch this.
I'm Captain Moore. I'm walking for the NHS.
It may feel that the world is in crisis, and that means now is the time to come together. The LGBTQ community must come together.
Are LGBT voices important to you? Can the news of the world have a gay community perspective?
If you, like us, think the answer is a resounding yes, then please like and subscribe to Q News Tonight on YouTube and Facebook.
Do our gay cultural stories impact you, your friends, and family?
Start a watch party tonight. Get your circle involved in our conversation. Watch those good news stories as it supports our gay community. We cue up the USA tonight by reporting this story of Trump trying to misdirect you from his failures by trying to adjourn Congress to fill vacancies. We've prepared what he's trying to do. Watch this.
There are currently 129 nominees stuck in the Senate because of partisan obstruction. Many are nominated for vacancies that must be filled, to assist with the coronavirus crisis and the resulting economic challenges. The Senate has left Washington until at least May 4th. The Constitution provides a mechanism for the president to fill positions in such circumstances. The recess appointment, it's called. The Senate's practice of gaveling into so-called pro forma sessions where no one is even there has prevented me from using the constitutional authority that we're given under the recess provisions. The Senate should either fulfill its duty and vote on my nominees, or it should formally adjourn so that I can make recess appointments.
You hear it from himself. Trump adjourns Congress to unilaterally install appointees. Democrats have stated that he has forced the Senate to eat up time. He has stated that Democrats were forcing Senates to eat up time confirming judges, including the GOP priority of confirming these judges, which left no time for anybody else. It is within the president's power to adjourn Congress, but only if the two chambers actually disagree with each other. It's an extraordinary circumstance that has so far never been revoked in our entire nation's history. This would require the Senate, and specifically Mitch McConnell, not our friend generally, who stated that he wouldn't win without the Democrats. Let's see if we can hold him to that word. The questions here are if Trump really is becoming a dictator. He's been said in the past that he's not the ruler, that we're the ruler. That was the start of his candidacy and presidency. He asked if he should run for a third term, which is a part of the 22nd Amendment. Obviously, he should not. It's illegal. And he asked if he could be taking powers from the states as recently as yesterday, a violation of the 10th Amendment, as well as violating the First Amendment, which states that he is attempting to ban the press and freedom of press.
Any thoughts here about what he's trying to do?
He's becoming a dictator. If I didn't make
Not
that clear.
becoming, he's always been a dictator.
Yeah, actually, I even take it a step farther. He thinks he's King George, and this is a revolutionary time, and we're at 1775 all over again. It didn't work out very well for that king. Q News Tonight is part of the Happening Out television network, and we are the Daily News.
We are also part of the most popular live gay TV show in the world, every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on It's Happening Out.
It's a talk show like television's The View, with a whole lot of gay people.
We continue to cue up gay culture tonight by reporting that 160 plus LGBTQ centers are in desperate need of COVID-19 funds, or they face closure. Very disturbing. Misty, tell us about what's happening here.
Disturbing indeed. This is definitely not coronavirus good news. There are over 160 LGBTQ centers that are facing closing, and that means over tens of thousands of people will not get help. And we have to realize that these centers are helping people with lots of things: medical care, mental health counseling, support groups, filling of prescriptions, helping people with food, both stocking their storage, but also hot meals. Many LGBTQ centers help people with hot meals, case management, HIV testing, and some offer shelters. This is truly disturbing, and we do need to chip in and remember our nonprofits.
It's distressing to me because just like the World AIDS Museum that we're broadcasting in, we're at risk of losing whole major chunks of our cultural life in our LGBT community in America. Not only our service providers, we talk about our 501c3s, but it's distressing to me that this is a cultural impact because our pride centers, our LGBT centers in most of the major metropolitan cities in America are where we come and gather. It's not just gay bars. It's these cultural centers, and they provide healthcare and food and senior services And we are at risk of losing that and losing our museums and so many things that have created the milestones of the LGBT community. So it's very distressing to me.
Yes, we do hope that you will donate to each of these individual locations, as well as we hope that you'll donate to the World AIDS Museum so that we can keep running. They have done great things for us and for the rest of the world. So please, not just with the rest of the community, but here specifically, now is the time for our LGBTQ, our queer community, to come together and support these organizations, because you want to see them thrive. We don't want to relapse into parts of our past where LGBT people were not treated the way that they so far have been.
Very well said. Tonight we are broadcasting from one of those places, our studio set in the middle of the World AIDS Museum and Education Center, right here in Wilton Manors and Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We joke, while Misty every night sings out gay, I say the joke that we are literally coming from the gayest place on planet Earth. We also thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living, that we're at right now here in the middle of the World AIDS Museum here in Fort Lauderdale. We continue our news by queuing up the USA. Famous gay classical pianist is the third death of the National Task Force Miami Winter Party. Before we tell you a little of that story, let us show you a little more about who this pianist was and what the mayor of Fort Lauderdale has said about him. Watch this.
When we heard about the passing of Tom Carr, the entire community felt the loss. His good cheer, his philanthropy, his being a friend to so many. It's raised the importance of how we need to maintain our distances, limit our social contacts, and as a result, our community will survive and will be better as a result.
That was Tom Carr, 67, diabetic. We reported on him last week, and we knew that the condition was critical. He was, at the time, one of many people, 38 people that went to Winter Party that was hosted by the National LGBTQ Task Force are now dead, and he is the third that has been. Carr was hospitalized 3 weeks ago on March 23rd, long before the president made any kind of statement clear about the White Party. In fact, the White Party was March 4th to 10th, and that was before Trump made any statement at all as to the deadly nature of the virus. So it can be directly attributed to him that members of our community are starting to die. We've already seen 3. Carr had a very unique opportunity to have a blood antibody treatment. He only had 1 shot, and blood was donated by many survivors of corona, including his husband. Unfortunately, that was not enough to save his life, though his husband does still live. We will follow this up with responses from the LGBTQ Task Force and other representatives we can find as the story continues to unfold here on Q News tonight.
One of the things that, it's a very sad story. We are personally affected by this at Q News tonight because we considered participation in the Winter Party. Yeah. Napoleon and I considered participation.
They asked us specifically to be the faces for them.
Exactly. And of course, we've thought about this 1,000 times since this has happened. Beyond the sad news here on the movement to fight social isolation, which is really what the Winter Party ended up being, I think about our colleagues here at It's Happening Out. I have spoken to Ron Boranensky's husband today. Ron, our host at It's Happening Out, is still in critical condition in ICU and hospital here in Miami. And he is just about in the same time point as we reported in this situation. And there hasn't been a turn yet. But it is a critical situation where he's in a medically induced coma. And we also do a shout out for Chef Josie, our host at happening.fun and It's Happening Out. And she is COVID positive and is now going into the beginning of the 3rd week of her quarantine isolation. So we think about everybody that is affected. We are all now affected by COVID-19 everywhere in the LGBT world. Q News Tonight has created a special Facebook group about the LGBTQ plus coronavirus facts that you need to know. And you can find it in this Facebook page that we're putting up to you now. We're getting ready to go into this special that we are doing tonight about providing facts. The reason we're doing this, and in this instance, the group is moderated because it's so important to have accurate information. The internet, studies are suggesting, surveys are suggesting, 50% of all of the information that you're seeing in social media is inaccurate. And inaccurate is being repeated over and over again. So this group is moderated by infectious disease specialists, mental health specialists, medical experts, social service providers. It has recommendations on how to spend your time and more.
We even have enlisted spiritual leaders, all there to help you through this crisis. Be sure to join the group and ask any questions you like.
So this is part 5 of Q's Q&A on coronavirus, specifically for and aimed at the LGBT community for April 16. This special segment tonight on Q News Tonight is designed to be a unique America to answer your question about coronavirus for the LGBT community during the pandemic itself. Tonight we have an American pioneer in AIDS, HIV medical treatment. With us tonight is Dr. Howard Grossman, specialist in internal medicine with an emphasis on HIV. He had a private practice in Manhattan before he came to South Florida, which was one of the largest HIV practices in New York. He has become nationally recognized as an educator on HIV issues and an advocate for the LGBT civil rights and rights of our entire community. We'd like to welcome Dr. Grossman. And before we get into answering your questions, it's been another big week in coronavirus land. So let's start with what we know what the politics are. Let's start with the science and the medical community, which is what you represent. Where would you like to start in terms of the week in COVID-19? What's gone on this week?
First, I want to say thank you for inviting me back to this really important news show, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the science and answer viewers' questions. So I would say a few things from this week. Number one, in one of your last stories, you talked about the gentleman who passed away, unfortunately, and you mentioned that he got an infusion, but he only had one. And this is something that's important for people to know about, that all over the country, blood plasma is being collected from people who have had coronavirus and survived and now recovered, because what they're looking to do is to try to passively infuse antibodies, which are in the plasma, into patients who are severely ill in the hopes that you can transfer some kind of immunity. So I would encourage anybody who's been sick and knows they had COVID-19 to contact some of the blood donation centers, like One Blood here in South Florida, that are collecting samples. I'm going to be doing that very shortly.
Dr. Grossman, I apologize for interrupting, but I want to make sure that I provide a highlight of that statement, because I haven't frankly heard that before. Your challenge is to say if you have contracted COVID-19, you should specifically be offering blood donation.
It's plasma donation.
Well, explain the difference. I don't.
Plasma is what your red blood cells travel in. It's the fluid. And in that fluid are antibodies. That's where you're going to have them. So what they do is take off blood and they give you back the red blood cells. So it really isn't the same as giving a whole unit of blood. They're just taking off the fluid.
Are they accepting LGBTQ or specifically gay men's blood during the plasma during the pandemic?
They are. Supposedly, you cannot have had sex for 3 months.
90 days.
And which is a big change because it was down to a year. 90 days is a little bit more reasonable, though still outrageous because they don't do the same thing with straight people. You could be a sex worker in the straight world and walk in and donate blood.
And you should get tested for the antibodies before you do this, or if you've recovered, still go and do it no matter what?
No, if you've recovered, they will test you.
Okay.
And who does that? Do you go into a blood bank, for example, or
There are multiple blood banks. So One Blood is a center that's all around the country. Specifically, they're also down here in South Florida. The New York Blood Center. There are a number of places that are accepting these donations.
So, in clarity, if I had been tested positive, and there was a blood mobile or someplace, if I went into a blood bank and said I had COVID-19, I've recovered, I want to donate for plasma, that blood bank would know what to do with me.
They might not. I would suggest going online and looking for the blood plasma donation and just Googling that. You can go to the One Blood website specifically for their focus on this.
Okay. I interrupted you. Other big things this week. Let me zero in on one of the things that's on the LGBT community's mind for sure. The president spoke tonight. He hasn't unveiled the specific plan of reopen. I guess that's the phrase that we're going to resolve to this point. But what's the medical and science community's reaction to what the president's been saying in this last week?
The medical and scientific community has been trying desperately to get real facts out there, as opposed to the falsehoods and just weirdness of these Trump campaign commercials that happen every night. Truthfully, if you ask what the reaction is, I would say most medical people's brains have been exploding. Most of my colleagues can't even watch him anymore because of the amount of lies and untruths and conspiracy theories and everything else that he promulgates that are really confusing people out there. So most of us have to spend a lot of time undoing his damage in the clinic because our patients are freaked out. So that's how people are reacting.
I think that's a really good opportunity, though, that the media has taken. I know MSNBC yesterday and today, and many more moving forward, are not even going to show what he's saying anymore because they feel just like you. It's not based in science. It's not based in Dr. Fauci's statements. It's not based in anything but what he wants the people to think and feel, and so he's willing to say it. And more media is turning off his press conferences just to make sure that misinformation doesn't get heard at all.
Or they're running the tape underneath that counters his lies as they happen.
I thought of you, Dr. Grossman, this week, but we're getting ready to launch into these questions. We have a lot of good questions that you have, America, that you have submitted. But I thought of you this week because I watched the press conference, which was, I believe, the last one that was held in the press room inside the White House. Now he's gone into the garden. But the last one, and both Burke and Fauci were seated on the side of the room, and you saw them in the photograph. But for all intents and purposes, they did not speak through the whole, the entire campaign rally that he was hosting. As a medical professional at your level, what was your reaction of having the medical and science be seated in that way? They're present, they're shown like puppets, but they're really not involved in.
Right, well, he has shut them both up. And, of course, this week, he indirectly threatened to fire Tony Fauci by reposting a post from one of his crazy followers that was hashtag fire Fauci. And, he reposted it, but then he claims that, no, he really wasn't trying to fire him. But clearly the message was received because a lot of us were really shocked that Dr. Fauci seemed to back off his statement in an earlier press conference that this should have been handled better, that many deaths could have been avoided if we had started social distancing earlier. It certainly is the truth that Trump knew about this in November, that there were constant warnings from people in his cabinet, from intelligence services, that this was happening. Now imagine we are getting all of this testing online now. I mean, most of this took off at the end of February, beginning of March. And so in a month, we suddenly have all this testing, we have a bunch of treatments being tried, we have a lot of things going on. Imagine if we had had an extra 3 months to do that, where we would be now when the virus is ravaging the country.
Well,
so it was really strange to see Dr. Fauci, as he has been shut up by Trump before, having to back off and sitting there on the sidelines.
Let's get into viewer medical and their personal questions. But one last political question related to what you just said. So your observation that you just made about Dr. Fauci, I'm curious. Hypothetically, it's a hypothetical question, I know. You and other medical professionals like you, if you were in Fauci's position, exact same position, in the pressure of trying to get the correct medical information out, but dealing with a boss like Donald Trump, what would you personally do? You're Fauci. What would you do?
Listen, his main job is running the huge bureaucracy of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and trying to get the studies up and running that will answer the scientific questions we have. All the rest of this stuff is window dressing. Yeah, does he have to stroke Trump's whatever, like the rest of the people?
I'm sorry, did you say dick?
Ego.
Ego, thank you, Misty. Right. But, that's how you survive in this administration. I really hope that he doesn't get corrupted like so many other people have been close to Trump.
Are you concerned about that?
You're concerned about it when anybody is close to Trump.
Yeah.
He's just destruction on feet.
All right. Well, let's try to be valuable on that.
Can I give you some good news?
Oh yes, please.
We always welcome good news.
Right before we went on the air, I saw a report from Chicago, from the University of Chicago, which is one of the, I believe it's 162 sites around the world that are testing remdesivir. Remdesivir is an antiviral that's made by Gilead Sciences, and the doctors in Chicago are reporting amazing results. Now, they're actually supposed to do the first data cut, I believe, in the next week or so, and so a few days after that, they will look at it to see if they're getting any results that are outstanding. We should get, by the end of next week or by the end of the month, the first initial reports on that study.
And what would likely this lead to?
Well, if this treatment is as good as the patients in Chicago are being reported, all of those patients survived. Their fevers dropped. They came on. They were seriously ill, and most of them now left the hospital. So that would be the kind of amazing breakthrough that we really hope for. Yeah, far different from the hydroxychloroquine, which the president is promoting and is invested in, the companies that make it.
Personally invested in.
Personally invested. And, well, his,
family,
whatever.
Related,
yeah.
You've given us some real coronavirus good news. That should have been at the front of the segment with you.
Oh, yeah.
Let's jump right into these viewer questions. We're going to kind of do this as a lightning round in terms of setting up the question and focusing on trying to get the answer. And again, Dr. Grossman, we really appreciate you sitting down with the LGBT community of America and the world to be able to do this. So let me kick it right off in our first question. I've been seeing absurd memes online suggesting a global conspiracy is going on. Suggesting, for example, as one of them, that 1.4 billion people get influenza and 575,000 supposedly die each year from it. So it's not possible that 2 million cases of COVID-19 and 50,000 deaths of COVID-19 can legitimately overwhelm our healthcare system. So it is some kind of fraudulent propulsion of whatever. What do you think about what you're seeing online?
Well, realize that any time that things are so crazy, there are conspiracy theories that are going to float around. On this one, the thing is, look at what goes on in the U.S., truthfully. You have several million cases of flu every year, and probably about 25 to 30,000 people die. We've had over 30,000 people die in a month. Flu season lasts from September to April. Okay, you spread these things out. We've had that many people happen in a couple of weeks. Yes, and most people with flu, even when they get really sick.
So similar to our goal that we're hearing from health experts about flattening the curve.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
You're not flattening the curve because you're stopping people from getting infected in the long run, because all of us are sensitive to this virus until they have a vaccine. What you're doing, though, is making sure that you don't overwhelm the hospitals all at once. Yeah. If 300 million people got sick in the same month we'd be in real trouble.
That's more good news indeed. I've got another question. If I'm using a cloth mask, how often should I wash it?
Well, I hear a lot of people talking about they realize how much they have coffee breath because they're breathing in and out in their masks.
Yeah.
I would probably say that you want to wash it as often as you would wash your clothes. And that's, I'm totally pulling that out of the air. I don't think anybody really
I've heard that
knows.
ironing it can actually work really well too because the heat will kill the virus.
Is that true?
That's probable. I would say that that's probably true. I don't know for sure. But, heat does kill viruses. Just keeping it clean. What we're
how
doing.
do you feel
what
about
people
the
doing-
growing movement of you've got to have a mask? You can't be in Los Angeles. You can't leave your home without a mask. How do you feel about that?
Well, truthfully, I don't see where there's a huge risk outside, and it's a little weird to me to watch people driving around in their own personal cars with masks on. But I certainly think in a grocery store, in a big box store like Target or Best Buy, well, you can't go into Best Buy, but in Target or Costco, at the pharmacy, you're in a store, you're in a closed space where people are coughing, the stuff is going to be in the air. I think there is a really good place to wear a mask. But I'm not sure. You hear them saying people should wear them on the street. And certainly plenty of people are.
Well, I know it makes me feel a lot better, especially as it might come to other things like being reinfected. I think even if I passed through and I did not have anything still testing, that I'd want to wear a mask just to protect others, just because this disease is so crazy and we're not sure of so many things. I know you have a question for that, Misty.
Not that. I have a different question. But my viewer question is, what is the latest testing showing about if one can be reinfected once they've had coronavirus, or if there are any antibodies that are produced for this season?
Okay, so for people who recover from the coronavirus, remember 25% of people will have no or little symptoms. But if you've had the coronavirus, you will develop antibodies. The first antibody you develop is called an IgM antibody. It's a very large antibody. This is true of all diseases. And then over time, you develop smaller antibodies called IgG that will carry you forward. Now, we don't know. This virus hasn't been around long enough to really know how protective these antibodies are and how long they'll last. What we can look at, though, are other coronaviruses like SARS and MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome, that have come before it. And with SARS, antibodies lasted for about 2 years. With MERS, about 3 years. And
so antibodies can expire basically in your body.
Yeah, over time. I mean, we're used to things like we get a hepatitis vaccine, and for some people that will give lifelong immunity, but for others it'll give 20 years of immunity, and then you have to.
If I can, I want to piggyback. Another viewer asked us, if infected with the COVID-19 and you recover from it, a little bit more than the antibody question, are you immune? Because there's been this conflicting story coming out of South Korea saying we thought it was all clear, and now we're showing cases of reinfection.
I think that's been a question of that there are cases of reinfection. I don't think we're really sure yet. When you listed Dr. Fauci, he thinks that this is going to be like SARS and MERS, where you do get antibodies that are protective for a certain amount of time. The question is, if they do disappear they disappear at faster rates in some people? In which case you would be more prone to reinfection. I mean, nobody knows that. And we do know there are other viruses like herpes where you can have antibodies that are not protective.
How about the question of immunity?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So nobody's really sure with this one yet. We would hope that it follows the pattern of other coronaviruses, but we're not sure.
Let's go right to the heart of Trump's issue about pushing to reopen America. If we're unclear about immunity and we're unclear if we can reinfect ourselves or be asymptomatic to reinfect someone else, how can we possibly ever get this under control until, obviously, some kind of vaccine, but until we have absolute widespread testing? How is it possible?
It's not. I mean, the key to getting us back together is widespread testing. Now, I don't understand why we can't do it. You know, when I was a kid, the polio vaccine came out with a sugar cube, and everybody in America lined up over a few weeks in churches and high schools to get that sugar cube. And I'll never forget that. I mean, whole towns were standing in line to get it. So we can do this kind of thing. We did it to stop polio.
Why aren't we doing it?
Because Trump will not use the powers that he actually has been given to take over production lines and take over supply lines to do this. Now, the current antibody test, for example, which came out just in the last 2 weeks, we suddenly have 70 different antibody tests. They've been pushed out without validation. So they have, some of the companies have done internal validation where, you know, are you picking up true positives, true negatives? That's basically what you do when you validate. The FDA has not. They've just put them out there and people are trying to figure it out. And I heard one expert say that at least 50% of these are worthless. So we need validated tests to tell, one, do you have an active infection? So we have the PCR test that will tell us that somebody has had an infection or has an infection if they have symptoms. The thing is that PCR test can stay positive. I've heard people give estimates anywhere from 21 days to 4 months. So you may have fully recovered and still have a positive test for COVID-19. But at least we would know that you were infected. And then if you have an antibody test that's valid, and if you go with enough of the experts that think that this is protective, then you know when somebody's recovered. People who aren't infected could go back to work. People who are recovered could go back to work. Are we taking a chance that maybe there could be some more infections? Maybe.
Well, related to that, how would you identify when the right time is to be retested on recovering from COVID-19?
Well, the thing you want to do is to go to the next test. So, you know, I can give you my own example. I never had any symptoms, but on March 10th, I decided, when the testing first came out, I decided to see how long it took for one of these tests to come back. And I sent off a nasal swab, and that was the CDC test, the original test. It took 12 days to come back. When it came back, which is why it's not worth getting tested, you know, it's going to take, by the time you test, you're already recovered by the time you get the result. But anyway, it came back 12 days later, and I came back positive. I self-isolated for another, 4 days. Wanted to give it a little bit more than 14, which is what's been the recommendation. And I did, in that time, I did another test, and it was also positive. But it looked like it was recovering, that I had less virus. And everybody in my office was tested, and everybody tested negative. So it really looked like I was not infectious. I did a third test, still positive, but also showing not infectious. And then I did an antibody test that was positive for antibodies. So, that really, I did more testing than you normally would. But so it seemed that the test was staying positive at 21 days, the original test, but the antibody test was also positive, showing recovery. And I think that that's how we're going to have to do this. When somebody is acutely infected, we're either going to have them isolate at home, or, I don't know, all these hotels are empty. Why not put people up at the Ritz-Carlton at government expense to isolate them in a really nice atmosphere where you would look forward to being isolated if you were infected. It wouldn't really be a punishment.
In relation to that story example of you, I know you had a question.
Yeah, you said 21 days. So I have a viewer question.
The test was still positive, the original PCR test.
So the question the viewer wrote was, how long does the virus stay in your body? Would you say over 21 days then? And the next part of their question is, how long are you contagious?
Okay, so people are contagious from before they get symptoms. So
right.
It's felt that if people are going to develop symptoms, remember lots of people won't, for those first 5 days beforehand, they're contagious.
Yes.
So it happens right from the beginning. It does seem that after somewhere between 14 and 21 days, people are no longer contagious. And that's certainly when my tests changed.
But it's still in your body.
The virus, no, you can still test. The tests can still be positive without you being infectious.
Okay.
At that point.
Another viewer asked us, is it possible to catch the coronavirus from a dead person?
Well, there's one case of that was reported this week from South Korea where a mortician actually got the virus, got infected from a dead body. But that's one in the world. But it does mean that people need to wear protective gear when they're handling people who've died.
And Dr. Grossman, we have, obviously, we're an LGBT show. We have lots of questions that are related very specifically to the gay community. I know Napoleon had one.
I do have one, and it's not even about fucking a gay person that's dead, because that's, of course, what some people do, necrophilia. But in this case, yeah, I mean, I'm terrified of reanimated corpses, and I keep thinking we're going to go there with this virus because it's just so unpredictable. But my question to you, as far as the LGBT community, I wanted to ask you, do poppers have any effect on the susceptibility to catching coronavirus?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say that, you know, the truth is, when you think, could anybody have predicted this whole thing? If you've watched any of the 150 disaster movies that have come out in the last 2 decades about pandemics, you knew when this thing moved from China to Italy that it was coming here.
Yeah,
it was a movie.
Parasite just came out. I mean, there are tons of movies that filled.
Wasn't Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie about this?
Exactly. So this question, you have to realize these are not things that have been studied, okay? So I would not assume that poppers have an effect on susceptibility to catching COVID, except for one thing. COVID does tend to enter through the respiratory tract. And poppers are very, very irritating. If you've ever seen somebody who spilled a bottle on themselves, you see the burn that they get. Very irritating to that. And so I wouldn't recommend it.
Because people breathe it in, and they're breathing in that same burn that they would have on their skin.
Well, if you burn the mucosa in the nose, you're getting rid of all the protection, the hairs there, and everything else that would keep.
So you don't want to be doing. You probably don't want to be doing poppers right now.
Exactly.
And social gatherings
or smoking.
Families
or smoking. Smokers are more susceptible to COVID-19 and die more quickly.
Smoking of anything, yeah.
Yes. So I have a question from a viewer that is currently very afraid, as many people are, and they're quarantining themselves, as we all are, but they want to see their children and their grandchildren. When would you say it would be safe for them to go and visit their loved ones?
I just had that question from a patient of mine today who wants to visit his 92-year-old mother. He thinks he had this 2 months ago. And we're going to test him for antibodies. But, you know, I think if he turns up antibody positive, it would be safe for him to see his mother. Probably still 6 feet apart, you know, probably still wearing a mask just to be safe. She's 92 years old. But, you know, they can be in the same.
I want to put an I want to take a highlighter to what I've learned so far in this conversation. It's very important to have the testing. It's very important to have the isolation, but antibodies are going to become really, really important as the next part of this story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. We have another question from a viewer that says, this is a very gay question, very LGBT question. We want to socialize. Is it safe to go to a barbecue or a gay pool party if we do the social isolation, the mask, etc.? Is it safe?
Well, that's not physical isolation. I mean,
thank you.
You know, I mean, that's, you know,
barbecue. It should be simple. I'm sorry, but people just disobey this all the time. It's absolutely frustrating.
I mean, you really have a big enough, you could fit 100 people in your backyard standing 6 to 15 feet apart. You know, now the latest is if you're running or you're doing some physical activity or moving fast, that you should be 15 feet apart from people.
You know, I just want to say that I have a friend that went to Winter Party and was extremely strong-voiced about the idea that it was the National LGBTQ Task Force, and he insists that they should have shut it down, and my exact response was no, it was Trump's responsibility to shut it down. And now he has a high fever. He says he didn't come in contact with anyone, but he's seeing the effects of having gone to that party, and it's unfortunate, but we're going to see more and more people like that are going to these parties that think that they're safe for whatever reason, and then come back infected and infecting other people.
If they reopen everything.
It's really heartbreaking.
Napoleon, you're a big advocate in the leather community. I know you had a question related to that.
That's right. I wanted to ask you, what kind of cleaner could I use that will kill the virus? Usually you have to use some sort of conditioner or something else to keep the leather intact.
Are there any specifics?
There are no specifics. Again, this is something that hasn't been studied, but we give our best guess. So do you, for people who are into leather and into where it might get splashed with something, do you use some kind of disinfectant to clean that, whether you use a conditioner as well? I would imagine that a disinfectant is a disinfectant. It will help to condition it.
You guys can follow us for more info on that, because I know I have to still be able to clean my leather somehow, and I know that all the doctors here will help us to do that.
Last night on the show, we did talk very realistically and very real and openly, rather, about our own personal depression from being socially isolated. What can you do, or what can you recommend for someone dealing with depression from social isolation?
Well, it's really important, first of all, that people try to connect virtually. And that, that's really important. You see all these things about virtual birthday parties on Zoom and things. My birthday is next Monday. I'll be all by myself. So that keeping those connections going is very important. The other thing is reaching out for mental health services. I mean, here in South Florida, Misty, I reach out to your organization,
absolutely.
SunServe, every single day, tell people to call there for help. Our counties here in South Florida have established mental health lines, hotlines. I think there are hotlines all over the country that people can call. Call them. If you're feeling really depressed, you don't know what to do.
There hasn't been much discussion about mental health yet. Do you think that's to come? Will that be a phase that we move into where we discuss mental health extensively?
Well, there's going to be tremendous depression. This is a traumatic experience for everybody. It's kind of like a war in a way, but it's happening in isolation. Every time we've had some disaster, we're able to reach out to each other and be together.
Napoleon, I know you got a lot of questions related to what happens with sexual clubs, etc. Give us a sample of one of those questions.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, what do you think that this time frame means where sex clubs are closed down? What do you think it means in the coming years for when they might open up? Places like the Eagle, places like bathhouses, or places like hourly motels. Will it be possible to clean those places thoroughly enough to actually get them open back up?
Well, I mean, for anybody who's been in those places, they're not very clean, no matter how much they try to do it. I remember years ago, a bunch of medical students going to the mine shaft in New York and culturing just about every bacteria you could find.
Dr. Grossman, I didn't hear if you were at the mine shaft.
I was not.
But a simple blacklight test can do that here too.
Okay. Right. This viewer has a question that's kind of like...
But I do think people will need to think about their own personal risk here. Those places would be hot houses for spreading virus as long as it's around. If people have already been infected, maybe it will be safer. But I think people really need to think carefully about that. But let's face it, you realize you can't legislate sex, and you cannot protect people from their own impulses. And so we're going to have to talk about this in more detail.
Or we really become the Handmaid's Tale at that point. So let's see what happens and how our country moves.
So my next question, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you before. It's kind of like the depression question, but a little different. This viewer and a lot of my friends and my clients at SunServe are struggling with crippling anxiety and fear. Mm-hmm. The question specifically reads, I'm afraid to talk about my fears. Am I alone?
No, not at all. You're not alone at all. I hear this every day. In my virtual visits with my patients. I mean, people are not used to being stuck in the house, being alone. I would highly recommend that people find ways to exercise, that people with dogs are out walking those dogs 12 times a day.
Yeah.
That you get out of the house and physically distance yourself, but that you get some air and some exercise. People can talk from 6 feet away, and as you walk around the neighborhood, you say hello to all. Everybody says hello walking by. I think that kind of connection is important. But again, get on the phone. If either get on the phone or get on virtually, you don't have to show your face. You can talk and be completely anonymous and talk about your fear. Let's face it, the news is not giving us the information that most people want to hear. We're hearing about the tough stuff, the deaths, the respirators, the lack of supplies, the mess of the fuck-ups, since we're on this show, of the Trump administration. We don't hear the information that I need every day to be by myself. I've posted some stuff on our Midway Specialty Care Facebook page, Wilton Manor's Facebook page. Some things that I thought were just important things for people to know about testing and about things you need in your house in case you get sick. To try to calm people's fears, and I think that really helps. And other doctors are doing the same.
And I know running has been seen as one of the most prominent ways because of the level of endorphins and just how it works in your brain. Running is allegedly the best way to combat any kind of fears or anxieties, especially which many people are having right now. I'm not much of a runner. I haven't been since I was in high school, but I think that could be a good thing for a lot of people, especially down in Florida where we have the opportunity to start running again. You can do it in pairs at 6 feet, like you said, but it really does something different for the brain, and it could help you through this.
Run up and down the stairs if you're in an apartment building.
Absolutely.
Dr. Grossman, we really appreciate you being with us here tonight. We're going to continue to ask you to help us in so many questions. We're sorry we haven't been able to get to completion. One final question before we finish this special segment, and I thought it was quite poignant. The viewer said, I am reading more and more that we are never going to be the same again. Is that true? What do you think from your perspective?
I'm not sure that as a people we'll ever be the same again. I mean, as a LGBT community, are we the same after HIV was such a disaster as we were before? And the answer is no. You can't go through that kind of traumatic thing without getting changed. I hope that we will get back to where we know who's infected and who might be spreading, we know who is past it, and we know who's not infected, and we can get back to group activities. I think that will happen, but it's going to depend on testing, contact tracing, all the things that you hear Governor Cuomo talk about, some of the other great governors in the country, not ours, Governor DeSantis, but other people. These are the kind of scientific tools that will get us back to a new normal.
Well, it's important on that last question for you, Dr. Grossman, because I do think the coronavirus story is just like flattening the curve. Our response to this is also curve-like. We're at certain places in this story, and we haven't got to those conclusions yet.
But people do need hope. They need hope, and I think hope is there. It may take an election to change our government, but we will get back to a new normal.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Grossman, again, thank you very much for being with us tonight. We're going to invite you back. Just incredibly knowledgeable about especially HIV, a doctor of internal medicine, and staying right on top of COVID-19, having contracted COVID-19 himself. And so a fascinating perspective from you, and we thank you very much for being at Q News tonight. So we are going to move on to close the show tonight, coming out of this segment by finishing in a little bit of a lighter way. It's called The Big Finish. There are many stories today we only want to briefly mention, and in an entertaining or ironic kind of way. So let's see if Misty, Napoleon, and I can entertain each other as we have a lightning round on the LGBT news of the day and news of an LGBT perspective. And so that is our segment called Q News Tonight, The Big Finish. So we begin. Story number one in The Big Finish. TLC Network introduces Dragnificent. How much of this can America take? We have a little on this. First, let me show you about this. Watch.
Drag is not about becoming a different person. It really is about.
Is this playing?
Drag
allowed us.
Three drag shows I watched were, of course, 15 variations of RuPaul, Dragula, and then another variation of RuPaul, AJ and the Queen. I am about out of tokens to try to get my less gay friends that don't care about gay culture to watch this shit. It's really depleting on them. The last time they walked in and it was just all gay guys shaking their asses, doing their thing, and he literally walked back out of the room and said, "Find me later, I'm not watching this." I really hope that we can present more of our LGBT community than just shaking your ass and, watch yourself.
When I first saw this segment of this document, this part of The Big Finish, the Dragnificent is what I was looking for. I was like, yes, something that's not RuPaul's Drag Race. There are other drag queens in the United States of America than the girls that have been on RuPaul's. And that was my first thought. And I'm like, and then I looked at it and I'm like, oh, it is RuPaul girls. And I'm friends with 3 of them. So I'm glad that they're working. But also, there are other drag queens out there. And what about a transgender makeover show? Why aren't there more trans people working?
Well, unlike RuPaul's Drag Race, they're not going to argue if they are drag or a drag queen or a man or trans. So I guess that's good. But like the Real Housewives franchise, how much of this can you take? Unless your last name is Kardashian, you're probably not going to be so successful. But I hope you will. We cue up the big finish by saying Tiger King Joe Exotic is a really big Trump supporter because, oh well, of course he is.
I would say that he's a brown noser. But that makes me really want to think about what is actually up Trump. Of course, this is the person that's going to be pardoning him. And if the rest of Trump is orange or default other colors, I really don't want to imagine what's up his bum and what color that would be once Joe Exotic was up there. It makes me really a little sick, quite honestly.
But now that Donald Trump Jr. is one of his biggest fans, and Donald Trump Sr. is thinking about pardoning him, I honestly would be his biggest fan if I was in prison thinking I could get out. I don't blame him.
A crazy gay guy that loves Donald Trump. Wait. Are we talking about the log cabin Republicans? Everyone who is sick of hearing the words Tiger King or Joe Exotic, please raise your hand.
All of America, all of the world.
Joe, you exotic king, tiger, whatever. Your 5 minutes are almost up. This story and you remind me of why we love shooting stars. They only last moments. We like to look at you, kind of like train wrecks. And we are glad you are billions of miles away because you likely smell bad and really need a shower.
Truth.
And loving Trump? Probably you need to read a book. The Big Finish story. The want to co-host with Ellen DeGeneres has come out today. Her response to the petition to get rid of her.
Let me be clear, I absolutely want to co-host with Ellen DeGeneres. From the start of It's Happening Out, our longest running show on Happening Out Television Network, I ended every single episode with, come on Ellen, invite me on to dance. I'm a great dancer. My name is Napoleon Plays. I said this earlier at the top of the show. You are my role model. The idea of having fun and playing and making that part of what we do, you are my role model. And so I really hope that you'll choose me. I'm going to submit to you time and time again, and I'm going to see how much money I can get you to have raised in your field, because this is about an all-in challenge. You've been challenged by DiCaprio, by so many people. Bieber is going to be doing a song that he'll serenade people with, but I want you, and I have to figure out a way to get on your show. I know my whole team supports me. We'll figure it out, and you'll see more from me coming up soon.
Quick, help me get $25.
This woman is brilliant. She responds to petty gay people by being the best of gay. Ask average people to co-host the show with her. Ask to donate at least $25 to apply to host the show with her. And it all goes to COVID-19 charities. Brilliant woman. While the thousands that show their silly, ignorant, entitled asses, Ellen does what she always does. She and Michelle Obama always go high. FYI, my $25 in application is on the way, and just kicking Napoleon's ass would be totally worth it.
Of course you want to take away the only thing I love in the world, Al. Shame on you. Yes, the lesbians. Shame on you, Al.
The Big Finish. Trump's misdirection on his failures. This time, he's questioning the accuracy of China's published death toll.
Okay, we know Trump isn't the best with numbers. He still claims that America is doing its best and the best at testing. Numbers tell us we are one of the lowest testing countries compared to how many people we have. I know Trump has argued that 0 is actually the full sum owed to a lot of his employees throughout his entire life. But 0 isn't actually a counting number, and 0 is not the number that he's going to be able to use to win this endeavor. Shame on you, Trump. Go take a math class.
Donald Trump is a huge blame shifter, and he is a huge god of misdirection. However, I kind of might think this has truth to it. The COVID started to come around in January, and there weren't a lot of tests back in January. And we all know China likes to also misdirect and cover up and deny information. So I don't even think that they really tested that many people in China to begin with. So he might have a point here.
You know, I recall on January 17th, our idiot-in-chief was asked if he was concerned about President Xi's information on COVID-19. He said absolutely not. He was great friends with him and everything was A-OK. January 17th. Trump is interesting because it's Trump, despots, and dictators. Whether it's China, Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, he admires them. Why? Because he loves their absolute power. And he wants the same here. Dude, you're not getting it here. Your approval rating in the last 30 days has dropped a record 6 percentage points since you've been in office, just in the last 30 days. Clock is ticking. Tick, tock, tick. I just hope we're all still alive when it happens. The big finish. Together at Home is this Saturday at 8 p.m. on every television network on the planet.
This hosts basically every comedian, every artist that you've ever loved that's current today. Billie Eilish, Justin Bieber, of course Gaga's doing something amazing. She's already raised, I think, $40 million for the cause. Paul McCartney, the list could go on and on. Honestly, the joke is just how many people are getting involved in it. And if you can name them all, maybe they'll give you a prize too that gets donated to $20,000 to your local charity. I'd like to see them add that too. Because what else have you got to do?
I think this is beautiful. And like Napoleon said, I don't think you're going to really have a choice. If you're watching TV, every channel will be tuned into this concert. And I think it's beautiful. I think that the gay community could learn from this example. We so often fight with each other, and you can't go to this bar. And if you work at that bar, you can't work at my bar. And if you're friends with... It's sad and it's disgusting, but this is beautiful. And I go for the good cause. We are one human family, and we are all in this together. I think it's beautiful.
I completely agree. Together at Home. Unprecedented. All networks, live, worldwide. It's the only thing that can match the greatest medical, humanitarian, and economic crisis of our lifetimes. Bravo, and I can't wait. We finished tonight the big finish by reporting, and this was exciting news. 14 Tom of Finland's sketches have been found that have never been seen. And for my leather friends, what the fuck?
What kind of a Leatherman's sweaty cum sock did they pull this from? Have the sketches never been seen because they are just too indiscernible from human liquid? Maybe they are actually the great holy grail. I know I and anyone I know in the leather scene would do anything that we can to really try to get these on, to see these images, and please, 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 Jared Curry, roll it back. Let's find these images because God, Tom of Finland is a god, and the images he creates are basically men at their prime. Please let us find them.
You know, I was a little curious, and I did a quick Google search as soon as I saw this was one of our topics, and I found the 14 images. And yes, they're online, and some of them are sketches that he never printed, and I think that is brilliant to see the inner workings of the mind and creativity, but also some of them are collages of pictures of actual photographs that he's clipped out of men doing interesting poses, and he collaged them together and put them in like a obviously collage, but I was going to say document or frame, so he could study the physique. And I think they're beautiful. I like to see how artists think and create.
I bet he sealed each of those images not with regular shellac.
They were probably under his mattress in his bedroom, and his mom found them and submitted them. I don't know.
Growing up when I didn't know I was gay, and later when I didn't know I was deeply in the closet, Tom of Finland was what I thought all you gay guys looked like.
Truth.
Sadly, I was frequently disappointed. But the pictures and the drawings, Awesome. I have always, and I mean always, loved drag. Well, that's it in today's news for the LGBT community and the world's first LGBT live evening news show. Remember, if it's important to the LGBTQ community, it's important to Q News Tonight. But you must help us. Click subscribe on YouTube and share the news. We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. This is the only source of live LGBT news in the entire world. Your community needs your support. And remember, you're not alone. You're not alone. We will get through this crisis, and we're here for you. And this is Q News Tonight. So thank you for joining us. I'm Al Ferguson, and on behalf of my anchor partners, Misty Eyes and Napoleon Plays, we'll see you daily at 7 p.m. Good night.